In this tutorial, I want to go over the options menu here and the screens that you have. And it's actually opening a little bit to the left, so let me just drag it over slightly so you can see it. We've got 4 options in the menus. We've got spell checker, theme report, software settings, backup repair and database, and the ignore list. Let's have a quick look at spell checker. And this opens up the spell checking options. What you see is What You Get editor has a full spell checker in there, and you can set up a few of the options in this dialog box. One useful one here is to show spelling errors as you type. You get the little squiggly line underneath, and you've got a few other options there as well. You can also set to ignore things like words in uppercase, words containing numbers, or markup language HTML. And I've got it set here for ignoring internet addresses and abbreviations. And this is probably the same settings that you've got on yours. Under language, you can select the language that you want, and if your language isn't there, there's a good chance you can probably find the language if you click this download additional dictionaries. It doesn't include every language that there is, but there are quite a few there. And if I just scroll down, you can see a list of all the languages that Web Content Studio will support, because Web Content Studio uses the addictive software spell checking code. So any of these languages will work. Okay. To install a language, you download it, and then you want to copy the dictionary file to the place where Web Content Studio stores its data. You can do this by going to %appdata%, and this will take you to your roaming folder. So we've got inside the app data roaming, and then you want to find the WCS2 folder. Here we are, Web Content Studio 2, WCS2. If you see Web Content Studio, then you must have installed version 1 of the software, but we want to install the dictionaries inside WCS2 and then inside the dictionaries folder. So just paste them in there, and the dictionaries will look like this. This is the British one, british.adm. So it'll have the ADM extension. Once you've copied it there, then you should find that the dictionary appears in your list. If you've got the dictionaries stored somewhere else, you can always use the locate button to tell the software where the dictionaries are located, but I highly recommend you put them in that app data in the roaming folder, Web Content Studio 2, inside the dictionaries folder. Okay. The custom dictionary is just a dictionary where your custom words are going to be added. So if I had words that aren't being found in the normal dictionary, I could come in and I could type it in here and add them. I could also change those that are auto-corrected and put in some exclusions here, which is not something I actually use myself. If you look at the note there, it says exclusions are forbidden words that will always be considered incorrectly spelled. Not too sure of the reason for having those, but anyway, those options are there. So that's the spell checker. Once you've got the spell checker working, you can come in, and if I type a word incorrectly, you can see that it's now underlined. If I right click, it gives me options where I can have a look for the correct one. So that's the spell checker. Let's have a look at the next one, the theme report software settings. And this is one where I don't recommend you make too many changes. The over optimization penalty levels, leave them as they are. This is something that I periodically change, and you will get updated when I change them depending on what Google is doing. But this will help you in the reports to help tell you when you're using words too many times. And related to this, we've got a warning level. Warn if any keyword goes over a density of, and warn if a phrase goes over a density of. With Google as it is, I would suggest leaving both of those as 1. What that means is if a word has a density over 1%, then in the reports you'll get a note saying this word appeared X number of times, which is more than 1%, and you can then decide if you want to lower it down. You'll see more of that when we come to actually write some content in this course and use the reports to try to refine it and make it Google friendly. One of the most important things about Google that a lot of people don't realize now is that you don't have to repeat a word or a phrase over and over down the page. You don't need to hit any particular densities. You only need to have the words on the page once. If it's really important, then you can have it in various places on your page, but you don't have to keep repeating words and phrases. So both of those, I would suggest you leave them as 1%. The next option is backup and repair database, and this is not something you really need to do, usually because the databases are very, very robust, and I've never had to repair a database, but the option is there if you want to. If you find that your database seems to have been broken somehow, then you can repair it. You can also specify a backup location and back up the databases, which is a good idea in case your computer crashes, and then you always have the backups to rely on. The final option is the ignore list, and the ignore list is something, this is a global ignore list, so that when we're coming to use the keyword spider, anything on this ignore list is ignored as being basically not an important word. And we'll look at that more when we come over to have a look at the keyword spider. But essentially, if a phrase began with the word the, then I wouldn't include the in the phrase because the is on the ignore list, therefore it's not an important word. So, for example, if there was a phrase found called, maybe let's say, the Atkins diet, because the is on the ignore list, the would not be included as part of the phrase. It would just be Atkins diet. And you can add, from the spider, you can add words to this list. You've also got the option to ignore sites when you're spidering. Now, one of the things you often get are sites like YouTube, which don't provide an awful lot of useful keywords. They might do. You might want to use YouTube, but what you could do is you could type in youtube.com, and then when the spider goes away to look for keywords, it will just ignore any URL on the YouTube domain. That should make a little bit more sense when we look at the spider. And you can also decide if there is a particular search, you're doing a search, and you decide that on this particular spider run you want to exclude a few sites. You can do that as well, sort of as a temporary exclusion. The options here on this ignore list, ignore when spidering, these are global and they will be used every single time. If you make changes within this dialog box, just click the little save button and then you can close it. So those are the options in Web Content Studio. Nothing too complicated and not an awful lot for you to change.